There we go. And just like that, we're right in camp. Welcome, everybody. I'm excited for today's conversation. And of course, for everybody jumping into the Modern Sales Pros Camp Modern Sales, always excited to do another fun MSP event. I've been doing these for years with Pete and Jason and everybody else involved on the MSP team. And like always, we have another great event lined up, and we're going to kick it all off. So when we were prepping for this, I was really excited to meet and get to do this really cool conversation with three other badass founders that really have started to grow and build really unique products in the market that we're currently in, and are obviously seeing a lot of the success and fruits of their labor. But of course, a lot of these great ideas and a lot of these great products started somewhere, perhaps around a fire pit while we're ideating and trying to figure out how we go solve all the world's next big problems. So I am super excited to have Melanie from Spekit, Manoj from SalesIntel, and of course, Neil from Navattic joining us today to tell us a little bit about their experience as they have founded these companies, have gone through all the fun ups and downs and lefts and right that are involved on this roller coaster that we're on as founders. But before we get too far into the topics, certainly want to do a fun round of introductions. Again, I've met tons of people that are on this this webinar already and the folks that are joining, but formally, I'm Brad Smith, the co-founder of Sonar, headquartered here in beautiful and very warm Atlanta, Georgia right now, especially in the middle of the summer. But yeah, excited to help moderate today. And Melanie, I'm going to pass it over to you and let you introduce yourself.
Awesome. Thanks, Brad. Hi, everyone. I'm Melanie Fellay, co-founder and CEO here at Spekit. Started the company 6 years ago. And our vision is really to create a world where enablement and training and process guidance meets your employees in real time directly in their flow of work. So that's what we're building over here.
I love it. Great to have you, Melanie. I've known Melanie for years now. And it's just been so fun building companies beside each other. So excited to have you here. Manoj, I'll let you take it away.
Hi, Brad. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me. Hello, everybody. Great to be here. My name is Manoj Ramnani, founder and CEO of SalesIntel. At SalesIntel, we provide data and intelligence for the go-to-market team so that they can go build the strongest pipelines for their organizations.
Fantastic. Big fans of SalesIntel and excited to have you here, Manoj. Neil, last but certainly not least, we'll let you introduce yourself and take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Brad, and glad to be here. So for context, I'm Neil, the co-founder and CEO of Navattic. At Navattic, we help teams create interactive product demos, which are used in the sales process and marketing for top of funnel usage, really across the funnel. Excited to share some stories from the startup journey and jam with everyone today.
I love it. It's so cool having, especially founders, very, very focused on go-to-market technologies. Obviously, we're all near and dear to our hearts. I can't wait for some of these fun questions because this really does help us understand from sparks to flames of what a founder journey looks like. How in the world did you come up with these ideas? What are some of the strategies for assembling a resilient type company and really some of the roadblocks we've seen before? But really, what is it we're going to be focused on mostly is taking this idea that we talk about, that we get passion behind, how do we turn that into the biggest software company that we're all trying to build right now? I think the first and most important question, and we'll just dive right in, igniting your startup idea and bringing it to life. We've all done this, and I'll share a very brief story of mine, and then pass it over to these other founders to get them really telling us a lot of how they built what they've built so far. But for Sonar, we came up with this idea many, many years ago. 2018 was when we formally started our business. These founders here know that there's no fireworks or confetti cannons that go off when you click a couple buttons and you incorporate yourself, probably in Delaware, like a lot of us have done. But from there, the journey really begins of how do we start going to market? What do we think about our messaging? For us, it was interesting. We started our very first day for Jack, my co-founder, and I was January 1 of 2020. Not knowing that a pandemic was in that same year or in that same breath. It wasn't something that we were talking about at the time. So we have had a very interesting journey of both fundraising through a series, seed series, and a series A after that. Melanie and I actually share a same board member, which is fun. But it's been an up and down and left and right journey. But for us, a lot of it has always been coming down to how do we passionately solve the problems for our customers, especially as they are building their own go-to-market tech stacks. We all have go-to-market softwares here that we're all going to talk about. But for us, that passion has always lied in making the lives easier for the folks who own those pieces of technology. We all know maneuvering those is not easy, and configuring them is not easy, and making sure they work harmoniously together can be a challenge. We're here to make that a little bit easier. Our journey was, like I said, interesting, both in good markets and in bad, which is something that we're all seeing and feeling a little bit of as we speak. But I'll start with Manoj. Really curious, when you started to think of taking your idea that was just words, probably not even on paper yet, might have just been words that you were talking about with someone, to where you are now with SalesIntel. Would love to know how you jump-started that journey and took it from sparks to flame.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been very fortunate to build two successful and one unsuccessful company before SalesIntel. This is my fourth one, and I tell you learn a ton more from your failure than your successes. But actually, the SalesIntel, the idea of that, I drew up literally at the back of the napkin back in 2008, if you believe it. If you just search on my name, Manoj Ramnani, Wall Street Journal or Washington Post, you'll see that proverbial napkin. And the problem I was trying to solve was my own problem. Right? Every startup founder, regardless of what their title is, they are salespeople. Right? We all go pick up the phone, call the investor for the first sale, try to hire somebody for that first sale, try to recruit your executive team. That's a sales. Try to get your first customer. That's a sale. So, I was traveling from DC to Seattle, and I had a bunch of business cards trying to enter in 2008 on my Dell laptop from BlackBerry, transferring contacts, and the battery dies. I was like, there's got to be a better way to solve this contact management problem. So that's how I drew up a solution that I would use for myself. Fast forward, 4 years after that, we raised $30 million in 2012 to build a consumer application product that will solve contact decay problem, right? You and I meet, I give you my information, you store somewhere in your address book, and then I change my job or you change your job, and the address book has old contact information, right? And in the sales and marketing world, that address book is marketing automation system or CRM systems, right? So unfortunately, after raising $30 million, tried to build a consumer business, we could not get a revenue model that could sustain $1 million a month burn. So 2012 to many years later, where we saw that all the data that we had a huge value for sales and marketing professionals. So about 5 years ago, I started what is SalesIntel today. And instead of solving the problem for the consumer, we use all this data, put the research team on top of it, and started providing the data to sales and marketing organizations like the go-to-market teams, and the businesses took out from there.
That's so fascinating. I think the one thing, Manoj, I love that you said it, and I'll repeat it because it's one big takeaway I took. You built a product that you yourself can use and you want to use. It sounds weird to say, and sometimes maybe cliche, but sadly, I can think of probably 10 products off the top of my head that might not have taken that same journey. And if you're not focusing on how you can even think about using it, much less how your customers can use it, you're just going to quickly find how quickly that can be displaced from each other. And it's going to be harder to get product feedback. It's going to be harder to keep iterating. So just starting foundationally there, that how would I go and solve this problem? How would this benefit me, is a great place to start. Melanie,
you could relate to it, right? Every single day, you could relate to the problem that you're facing, and you get so passionate about solving that problem, right? And it no longer is work.
Yes. I still, to this day, like, even as we show Sonar to customers, we show a live version of how we use it. We always say, like, yeah, we're drinking our own champagne. And if you're not, then you have to really come up with a really good reason why you're not. So again, foundationally starting how it can help you along with other folks is a great starting point. Melanie, I know I've been fortunate enough to hear so much of your founding story, but I'm excited for you to share with everybody else. But when you started to think about this from spark all the way through ideation and now to a great platform that you have with Spekit, where did you start?
Yeah, so I was working at other startups prior. I was working in San Francisco at a real estate crowdfunding platform called Real Shares at the time. And we had all the common challenges that most startups have when they're scaling. And really what I've come to find out every company has, which is, how do we make sure that, our teams understand how to use our systems? How do we know that they understand our processes? How do we ensure that when new people join the team, they understand the intricacies of our business, our terminology? We were in like a weird real estate finance space. So if you're hiring people that aren't from that industry, there's a lot of acronyms and terminology. And I'd worn a number of different hats, kind of running different operations teams, go-to-market teams, and kind of fell into the role of taking over what was a very failed implementation of Salesforce and trying to get it to a place where our teams were actually using it. And in that process, started looking for a solution that would help with this kind of training, knowledge, process challenge that we have. And I didn't have a background in enablement, so I didn't, have a bunch of LMS experience or knowledge-based experience to refer back to. And so I went on a hunt to look at solutions. And I ended up looking at 30 different tools across 4 different categories: LMS, CMS, knowledge management, and digital adoption platform. And what I found, I was like, it's kind of crazy that to solve these different problems that I have that all come down to just information or content, I need to buy potentially 4 different tools. And more than anything, all these tools were not where people actually needed it. I'm like, there's no way that our teams are going to go back and find that information. And so I kind of started dreaming up the idea of like, what would a solution look like that's actually integrated into our teams' workflows, where the information they need naturally surfaces to them when and where they need it. Where on my end, as I was communicating changes to all these different processes and tools, it was easier to communicate them exactly where people needed them. And really just couldn't get that bug and idea out of my head. And every time I started kind of testing this by going to other BizOps conferences, I'm like, how do you guys solve for change management? How do you guys get everyone aligned? And I was just met with all these eye rolls and sighs of like, it's a pain. We do Slack and email, and onboarding's a mess. And so that's kind of how I started validating the idea. Then we actually did some like surveys. I ended up co-founding the company with a dear friend, Zari, who I used to work with. And she had a product background. So she's like, we really need to validate that this isn't just our problem, but that other people have it too. So we did some SurveyMonkey surveys. I started reaching out to different communities and, really started coming to the conclusion that there was an opportunity to really rethink the world of enablement, change management with real-time information. So that's kind of how we got started. And then went on the long journey of kind of angel, then bootstrap, angel, and then eventually raising 2 years after starting the company. So.
That's so cool. I think, and again, I know I've been so close with Melanie over the years. We're very much allies in a lot of the way that we help serve a lot of our customers. But it's so genuine when you can see a problem and you can see multiple other strategies or softwares that can come into that. However, they just don't quite check all the boxes. And I think we feel that now with, you always see these big like MarTech maps and all the big technology maps, and they just get bigger and bigger and bigger now. But we're still facing some of those same problems these days. And I love it hearing and seeing an entrepreneur say, I see how this angle of attack is happening for 12 of these different types of products, but still not checking the right boxes. Let's go solve it the right way. I absolutely love it.
And taking inspiration, right? There were some things across these different platforms that I was like, wow, this is really valuable. And really looking at like, what do these platforms have in common versus what are the unique features that, if we could combine them or if we could rethink them around the assumptions we have of the world today, could that make for a better product ultimately? So, but yeah, definitely lots of inspiration there.
I love it. Also, the hat tip to you and Zari for the surveys, like getting just the questions out there and getting that feedback quick is challenging. We all know that because people don't always offer their time up all the time to give you feedback for your product. So getting that directional first and having your customers talk a lot is such a hard thing to do, but obviously it pays out dividends to where we are now. So I love it. Neil, last but certainly not least, on just the overall starting point, taking this conversation, sitting around these similar campfires like we have in our backgrounds to where you are today. Would love to know how you started it, where the idea came from, and where you are making that rounds today.
Yeah, no, thanks. And I think similar to Manoj and Melanie, it was very similar in that it was a problem that we deeply experienced. So for context, myself, my co-founder Randy, and I were at Oracle, and we were pre-sales engineers. So our entire job was delivering product demos day in and day out. And after all of these demos, we spent hours preparing a custom demo for a prospect. We'd do a great job delivering over Zoom, or so I thought. And at the end of that, they would say, this is great, but can we get hands-on the product? And nearly every time that would happen. And so, we see that a few times, like, oh, maybe this is an intricacy of enterprise sales. But then you start to realize like, hey, there actually isn't a really good way to provide hands-on access to the product in a way that we as a vendor felt comfortable with, given that the main options at the time were either a trial, which wasn't really feasible for many of Oracle's enterprise tools, or a sandbox, which we hated because it meant that someone would go in, they'd inevitably ask a million questions because they didn't have any training at all on the platform. Maybe they could use Spekit on how to do it. So I think for us, it was like very clear that this was a key pain point that existed. And so I think similar to Melanie, what we did is we asked other friends like, hey, this is a challenge and pain point at Oracle. Does this happen for you at this mid-market company, at your startup? And it turns out across the industry, there is pain points on getting access to the product, specifically in a way that vendors felt comfortable with. I think there's many ways you can get access, but in a positive light, there really wasn't something that could be done there. So I teamed up with one of my good friends from school, Chris, and the three of us ideated around this problem space. It took a while to land on something that met a lot of the qualifications that our buyers demanded and that would be a fit in the buying journey today, that had the qualifications of being a guided experience, people felt comfortable sharing this out, et cetera. But that was in 2020 when we went full time. And after that point, we made this a fully self-service product, and we were fortunate to go through the Y Combinator program and build and iterate out from there. But I think the key learning from us was find that pain point that was that 12 out of 10 problem for folks. And even if they can't tell you exactly how to solve it, you can find enough iterations over time, and eventually something will take hold that will lead to market adoption.
I totally agree. The 12 out of 10 is spot on. And that typically, and we all know this as founders, we can sit here and say, you told me it's a 12 out of 10, put a price tag behind that 12 out of 10. How expensive is that pain point for me to come and solve that for you? Because I think there's nothing more that we would rather hear, right? Like, oh my God, you have nailed this problem that is just totally a pain in my ass. Yes, it's a 12 out of 10. First thing I run is great. How much is it costing you, and how much are you worth paying to see if we can go solve that problem? So I love that. The other part that just really sticks out to me, and I love what you're doing with Navattic on this. We are now in a buyer world where people do want to get their hands on things, or at least feel what that experience can look like. And to be able to provide a platform and a viewpoint to say, yes, this is really what it feels like when you're in here maneuvering around and touching and feeling. I don't go and buy a new car without taking it for a test drive. And that's a lot of folks are saying, yes, let me go spin up a trial or a sandbox. We know how tough that can be, and it might not even paint the real picture. So being able to provide such a realistic view as to what an application is doing to be side saddled to the buyer journey is fantastic. So kudos to you, Neil, and everybody, all your co-founders too, for everything that you're doing so far with Navattic.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, moving into question number 2, and this was a little interesting. We've all just kind of knowing all of our businesses and the market that we're operating in, it can be tough to build teams. I think the hardest thing that we've all gone through different programs to help us become better founders and executives, but man, hiring's tough, and it's going to be one of the things that makes or breaks a lot of businesses. And so when we think about building a sturdy shelter, and I want to start thinking about some of the strategies for assembling a resilient and agile startup team. I think we've all felt this. And I'll share a quick anecdote, and then I'll pass it over to Melanie, Neil, and then Manoj to give us some insight. But building teams are tough, and hiring takes a long time. And there's still times that you think you've hired the right person, and you might have struck it out, or they've had a better opportunity pop up, and they're leaving. One really good guiding principle that a really early founder of mine, advisor of mine, told me was, the minute you start thinking about hiring someone, continue to do it yourself for another 60 to 90 days, and really neurotically keep track of, cool, here's the time where I would have delegated that over to this person, or here's the time that would have saved me 2 hours if somebody was already here. But be neurotic about it and measure that. Literally keep a little sticky note on there. Like when Jack, my co-founder, was thinking about hiring a new PM, his whole background's in product. He's like, I love doing this. Like, yeah, but you're kind of becoming a bottleneck now. We need somebody else to be doing this. Help me understand so I can support you in hiring that person. How much time is it going to save you? Are they going to be at full capacity on day one? Let's spend the next 60 or 90 days tracking that. I thought it was just a great mindset to think about hiring. But again, really curious some of the strategies that you three have come up with through this journey of it. Melanie, we're going to start with you. When you think about building a resilient team, what strategy did you employ, and what comes to mind?
Love it. Well, the first thing I'll say is that I think what's been the biggest learning for me over the last few years is really getting clear on my own leadership style and values, not on my aspirational leadership style and the person I wish I was, but like, what do I actually care about? How do I actually operate? What are the kinds of individuals that respond best to that? And I think getting really clear on that has helped a lot with hiring now, in terms of especially setting the right expectations with executives that we bring on, of just like, this is how I like to work. And it might be that this is not a working style that you appreciate, and getting really clear and transparent on that up front, as well as really starting with like, here's everything that's bad and wrong and scary, to make sure that people are really ready to come on board. So I will say, like, I think this idea that the founder should be selling this big vision is definitely important, but at the same time, like, really just being as clear and setting the best expectations possible ensures that you're bringing on the right people to your team. So I'd say that's something that has really come to life early on. And I do still think today, I really believe that hiring individuals that are really passionate about what you're doing is critical as a startup. I think, once you have thousands of employees, I can see why that becomes less important. But early on, especially if you just look at the dynamics of the last 2 years, not a single company that I know of has been, untouched by the market dynamics and the challenges and the fears and the difficulties that brings, And so if they don't have a deep belief in the vision and the mission to get through those rough waters, as well as obviously, a role that inspires them, I think that's really tough. And so even our first employees, our first sales reps, I had them demo the product to me. It wasn't just tell me about your background, it's demo the product to me. Can you get enthusiastic about it? I always quote John Barrows, sales is the transfer of enthusiasm. Can you get inspired and excited? And will you be able to bring that energy when you're talking to not just a customer, but everyone around you? And so I think that's really important. And then just going back to, the resiliency piece of the question, like, how do you find the right kind of DNA for a startup, right? Like, obviously it's great being able to bring on someone that has a ton of big company experience, but at the same time, like, the agility and the speed of execution is something that's really important, and making sure that those individuals really understand that and are excited about change, excited about the agility, and not, going to feel like it's constantly shifting strategies, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. It's funny. I've modified this question in my interview tactics over the years. And it used to be like, kind of, what wakes you up and gets you out of bed every morning? I feel like we've all asked that in some way. I am less sugar-coated with it now. It's like, what's your dopamine hit? What literally like gives you that sense? Because sales, it might be banging the gong. CS, it might be expanding or retaining a customer. Operations, making sure all your systems are working the right way. Everybody's dopamine hit is different, but if you don't know what that is, look, we're all coin operated to a degree. Money does get people out of bed, but there's many other aspects and facets of the business that do. So, but also the one thing I take away from that, Melanie, is being you as an authentic leader. Where you started in the first part of this was the leadership style that is best fit for you. I remember asking one of my advisors one day, it's like, hey man, I got to really start cracking a whip on folks. I got, see people are doing it. So I'm going to go in tomorrow and be really like tough, Brad. He's like, Brad, anybody that's ever met you knows that you are not a hard ass that way. Don't pretend to be. You're going to get laughed out of the room. So be your authentic and genuine self. You don't have to be somebody you're not, which I absolutely love that angle, Melanie. Neil, same question. Starting to think about how to build the right teams, the right folks onboarding, and especially showing some of that resiliency. What comes to mind?
Yeah, I would say one major learning that we've had at Navattic that I feel every founder learns in some way is that it is almost always the right move to hire at a very high bar and to not make hires out of necessity. I think we've all felt the pain of like, hey, we are so slammed. We just need one person in seat to help. And in reality, like, the cost of an okay hire is actually substantial. And the long-term benefit of an amazing hire is so high that it's almost always worth it to be frustratingly patient about hiring. So I think that is one lesson that we've learned, and we've actually turned that into an operating principle at Navattic, so that when you make a hire, we need to make sure that everyone is extremely high conviction. And YC has this motto of a soft yes, where they have a panel of 4 people and they don't allow soft yeses in because they found that the failure rate on the startups is so high. And I think the same goes with hiring too, that if people feel good but not great about a candidate, their likelihood of success is not going to pan out. So I think for us, maintaining that high bar has been helpful. So tactically, what we do is we do a gut check for our folks that we do take through the process, which really helps. But paired with that, we want to see a record of activity. So in other words, to Melanie's point in having them demo back the product to see what that looks like, for any different candidate, any different role, making sure that there's something that they do that can show their enthusiasm, that can show exactly like why they're excited, to make them put in the work, goes such a long way to vet out the great talkers that may not be a good fit once they actually get into the role. So we've learned that lesson the hard way, but now it's a key part of our strategy. And I'd advise folks that are listening in to really think critically about the folks that you bring on, just given the long-term benefits and consequently like the challenging outcomes that happen when it's not a good fit.
I'm not the moderator, Brad, but I have to jump in because I cannot agree more on the project. That's something that we've really introduced with every role. I think in the hiring craze of 2021, that was something that was often skipped because we were competing with like 5 other companies. But it is so telling what you can get out of someone presenting back their work or doing some sort of workshop versus just the talking and trusting your gut. Your gut never lies. And the only times that I haven't listened to it is when, there's been challenging decisions being made. So.
Exactly. Well, I'll tell you, we've all been there. Again, we've had market challenges. We all know what businesses have had to do to make sure that we create a long-term path for success. And, Neil, the first thing I'll start with, okay hires are not okay hires. Like, it is just so true. Like, if you're lowering your bar for any expectation or for any reason, you would rather be a little bit delayed in a product release or go-to-market initiative or anything than make a bad hire, because that's only going to set you back further. You're not doing yourself any favors by getting the B- player. So A's and A+ are the only thing that's acceptable. I agree, and we do the same thing on our hiring side for exercises. Jack, my co-founder, says it best. It eliminates tourism. And there's a lot of tourists in the startup world. They think, man, there's a kegerator in the kitchen. There's a ping pong table over there. We do fun happy hours. Those are all great. And you can get excited about that. And you can put that as your why you want to join. But man, until pen hits paper or fingers hit keyboard and somebody has to show you how they do it, it can be a really good eliminator of tourism. So eliminate the tourisms and get A+ players. Manoj, you built a phenomenal team and obviously a massively growing company. Tell us the secret sauce. What is it that you think about when building that resilient team?
Yeah, so we all established the importance of having a good team, right? Building a business is a team sport. I tell my team, look, if I was a pianist, I wouldn't need any one of you, and I'll work my ass off and be the best pianist. But I'm building a business, and for that you need a great team, great company. I've been very fortunate that for the last 20 years or so, this is the 4th company. There are over 24 of us who have been together for the last decade. Some of them have been with me for 15 years, and a couple have been with me since the first company, 21 days. So that helps to get started. But one thing, as we scale the businesses, I have found it's all about alignment, right? Alignment as to what you are looking for as a founder, as a recruiter, as a hiring manager, and what is it that the candidate is looking. Because startups are sexy when somebody looking outside and hey, this guy's driving Ferraris and he's speaking at all these panels and going for conferences and yada yada yada. It's great. That's why I want to join. But when you get right into working on startup, things change. Economies, the macroeconomic environment just work totally against you. We have seen in the last 12 months or so what's happening in the market, right? Investors back out, right? Your key executives leave. So it's very, very challenging. Under that situation, what we have realized is at the same time, I would say there are plenty of good people out there. They just may not be good for you, right? That's where the fit comes in. So we start with the foundation level to say, what is it that we are looking for? Are we looking for a doer, a driver, or a dreamer, right? If you need an individual contributor, that's a doer, right? Many a time somebody comes in with 3 years of experience and they think they're coming in as a driver. Sometimes these Gen Zs, it's like they are the dreamers. They come in the second week, hey, we should change the product strategy. I was like, time out. We hired you. You can contribute your ideas in the product strategy. We haven't given you the authority to go change the product direction, start writing the code, right? So I think once you get the alignment and reinforcing on that alignment, almost like monthly basis with the manager and the individual contributors and the director and the managers and the CEO and their executive team is so important because once you get that alignment during the hiring time, you have to keep that alignment going in order for you to build a successful team and ultimately successful company. Because as I said, building companies is a team sport.
It absolutely is a team sport. We emphasize that day in and day out. I'm probably going to borrow your line of doers, drivers, and dreamers. I literally was writing my notes down as you were saying it, and it's so true. I was at a company a long time ago, and there's I think it was a core value. It was like keys to the Ferrari, and it was aligned to your dreamer side. It's like, hey, if you got a good idea, come grab the keys and start driving. It's like, no, maybe we don't need all of a bunch of Ferrari drivers or decision makers. Maybe we do need some doers and some actual drivers. So I absolutely love that. We're going to keep cruising along. This is a really fun question for me, and we heard this earlier, and you can tell that this has been something that the three of you have worked on for many, many years. But taking this idea of fireside pitches that sizzle, and again, we'll stay very thematic in our fireside chats over here. But when we think about how you go about really nailing that messaging and that pitch to your market, that can be tough. So crafting and captivating pitches that grab attention and secure your support. The very short and funny quick story I have, this was, we were still kind of in stealth mode, and we were working on our angel investment side of things. And I'm on the phone or on Zoom with a good friend of mine, Kyle Porter, old CEO of SalesLoft right here in Atlanta. So we've known each other for years. They actually started in the same building that we're in right now. And he's like, yeah, ready to hear it. Like, hit me with it, Brad. And I was like, man, I haven't actually worked on this pitch at all. I was like, dude, I thought this was going to be a friendly, friend conversation. So I just start rambling. I'm like, so Kyle, if you think about your go-to-market tech stack and how much the money and the people, and he's like, done, Brad, time out, we're done. If you don't know how to nail your pitch in that first 30 seconds, I'm not going to give you another 30 seconds. And it just stuck with me so much that while our products evolve, while our positions evolve, while our ICPs and TAMs expand, all this fun stuff, we got 30 seconds to prove our worth. But all of that starts at the sizzle of a campfire as well. So I'm actually going to start with Neil this time, run over to Manoj, and Melanie, you can bring us home. But when you think about that pitch that sizzles, how did you get to where you are now? Because you all did it about 20 minutes ago and you nailed it. But I'm curious how that pitch has evolved and what you think about with nailing it. Neil, take it away.
Yeah. Well, I think one big learning that we had was, as we think about the different audiences, crafting and tailoring that pitch is so critical. I think one thing that was instilled in us is, hey, when you're fundraising, that investor pitch is so different than the customer pitch, than the pitch you make to partners. And so making sure it's deeply tailored is so critical. So that was one big learning that we had. But it also added in that generally, through the fundraising lens of things, I think one thing that's entirely underrated is that if you have traction, that is king. Your pitch can be okay, but if you have a business that's growing 25% month over month, it's a lot less noticeable. So I think one of the best things that founders can do is have a business that's growing substantially, have a key metric that's growing, and I think everything else falls into place. That said, having a strong communication skills, having the ability to align the team around the vision is so critical too and can't be overlooked. But I think in many ways, as it relates to fundraising specifically, getting that pitch right is almost secondary to some of the traction components. And we felt that too with our seed round, where we were selling the idea, which worked at a very high level, but it was a lot harder than when we raised our next round and we had a number that was growing at a pretty good rate, and that made things a lot easier. So I think focusing on the traction bit's important too, but then also thinking about the persona that you're targeting towards is equally important.
You're spot on. Knowing your audience is pretty important. I know it sounds cliche, but you're right. Pitching an investor is a much different pitch than a customer, because that investor is probably not looking to solve this problem. They don't even know what it really is. They don't have the pain that you're going to go and display to your customer about it. But man, are you spot on and 110% correct? Your metrics are your best pitch. There's no doubt about that, all day, every day. Manoj, curious to hear on your side too, nailing that pitch and really getting the excitement from the market. How did you get there?
Yeah. So, let's just separate the pitch in two parts, like pitching to the investors to get you financing so that you can get the money to build a product, to get the KPIs, and then, second part is pitching to the customer base. So, there's one common element in those two pitches is if you can relate to a problem that whether your investor is having or the customer is having, right? Or they can relate this, can communicate the problem statement, the problem that you're trying to solve in a way that they can relate to, makes things much easier, right? If I were pitching for the next generation of chip that's going to make the blade servers that much more efficient, it'll be very hard to communicate that to a non-technical investor. I'll give you an example where I had I pitched probably a dozen times and raised over 13, 14 rounds of financing. The best was when I pitched the idea of circle back, address book, keeping your contacts up, to a partner at Sequoia. And our pitch started with, look, back then it was BlackBerry. I was like, Jim, on your BlackBerry, a third of your contacts are out of date. It's like, yes, they are. I mean, you can't deny it because all over address book was. I was like, circle back is going to solve that. And his immediate question was, how? And I was like, do you use Waze for traffic? He said, yep, I use Waze for traffic. I was like, just like how you contribute your location on the road that you're traveling, and so does everybody else, and the collective contribution of the crowd makes the navigation experience super for you. Circleback does exactly same with the contacts. Everybody contributes the contacts. Our AI does this magic, and we make sure that your data stays up to date, your address book stays up to date. That's it. 45 minutes later, we had a commitment for $40 million. Because for Sequoia, the valuation didn't matter at what valuation, because those guys make big bets, right? Same thing here. Now switching the gears to now we're running SalesIntel. It's a data and intelligence platform for sales and marketing team. We call it. It's a pipeline generation. Every salesperson, every marketing person, every executive has a pipeline problem, right? No matter how big your company is, you always need more pipeline. So we started, hey, this is the solution that's going to solve your pipeline generation. How? Well, we're going to provide you the sales data and intelligence at the right time so that your marketing team, your sales team can communicate to the people. So I think the gist of this is, in summary, if you can relate to the problem that the person that you're delivering the pitch to, that makes life easier, where they understand exactly, and then they're curious about what the solution is, then you got them. If they're not paying attention, no matter how many times you practice it, no matter how many buzzwords you add to that, they're just not going to connect with you. The idea here is to connect them, and the way to connect them, what I found is get them hooked with the problem that they can relate to.
Making it relatable, and you're spot on. If they can't draw some sort of segue, some sort of like even balance to like, I understand the problem. If you can make an analogy that makes a problem similar to something that I already have a pain with, it just makes that conversation so much smoother. You're spot on. Melanie, curious on your side too about how you think about the pitch and just the refinement that has gone in over the years to get it to where you are today. Oh, you're on mute, I think. So there we go.
Thanks. Sorry about that. Manoj, clearly you've been doing this for a long time. It's funny. I actually still feel like my 30-second pitch is not my strength. It's something that I've actually written down that I'm going to be continuing to work on today after listening to this call. But going back to the investor versus customer piece, I think, Neil, on the customer side, I completely agree around knowing your audience. I'd even say within a customer, because I could relate more to the admin or RevOps or enablement person of our product, I was going really deep in the features and functionality and pitching all the value to them because they could relate to that. And that worked really well. But what I wasn't doing an effective job early on was, how does an executive, the person that's actually going to be allotting the budget for this purchase, relate to that problem? And what is the pitch to them? And so that was something early on that I just kept banging my head against the wall. I'm like, it's so clear. I'm developing such great champions, but it's not translating to the executive. So that was something that really was a big lesson early on making sure, going back to your point, Neil, of knowing your audience and how do you then translate that to actual business metrics that if you can influence the budget will come. And then on the investor side, I'd say the biggest takeaway to not repeat is know your objections. Like, know what an investor is likely going to come back to. And once you've done a few pitches, you'll see that a lot of the questions, end up being the same. So for example, for us, it was always around the competitive landscape, right? There are so many LMS platforms, so many content platforms, so many whatever. How are you all going to be different? How are you going to compete? And instead of waiting for that question to come, I started leading with that question, right? Leading so that I could control the narrative and not be on the defensive. And this is a tactic that I also, teach our sales reps. I'm like, hey, that the question is going to be, this is all great. This is amazing. If we could deliver this information in the flow of work exactly where reps need it, it would be a game changer. But how much work is it going to take? Who's going to create the content, right? And so now we bring that much sooner in the conversation to get ahead of those. So I'd say know your objections, know your competitive landscape like the back of your hand, stay up to date on it because investors will care. And Neil, of course, metrics make a huge difference in your ability to, hook investors as well. So that's it.
You're spot on. And it's so good to hear too, like the thought of proactively controlling the narrative. There have been times, don't get me wrong, that an investor or a customer asked me a question out of the blue that I've never heard before. And I think in that time, be authentic and be genuine. Like, man, that's a really good question. I just don't know the answer to that yet. Let me get back to you on it. But 9 times out of 10, I'm sure we probably know those. And if you can position and posture yourself in a way that you already know that question's coming and you can proactively answer it, too easy. It just makes you look so much more in control and that you've already thought around that corner that they're thinking about as we speak. So I absolutely love it. All right, we got 2 more pretty hot topics. I know we're getting close on time, so we'll pick up the pace. We'll do some rapid fire a little bit. But I really love this next question because, man, how fitting is it in a year that we've had, in the last couple of years we've had, hiking through challenges, right? Navigating obstacles and pivots on your entrepreneurial journey. Man, I'm sure we could probably spend the next couple of hours with the 4 of us talking about all the different ways we've stubbed our toes. I'll be brief in mine. I think things that we would have never thought about needing to worry about earlier this year are banks are might be in jeopardy. And now I'm a Series A company and I have to start thinking about treasury. What? That is not something that was necessarily on my mind earlier this year, but hey, we'll roll with the punches. And so I think if there's anything, what I've been telling our team and other founders that I work with and consult with and advise, control what you can control. Right now, sadly, we can't control markets. We can't control world economic issues or wars or even banks failing. But what we can control is our attitudes and really how we go about controlling every single thing that we do on our daily basis. It's kind of what I've always looked back on. But, in the same vein, Manoj, we'll start with you. We'll go to Mel after that. And Neil, you'll bring us home. We'll get a little rapid fire pace of some of the issues and things that you are hitting and how you've overcome those and the challenges that we've seen so far.
Yeah. Pretty much in every startup, the idea that you start with and the company it becomes when you grow up are not the same, right? My first company, I set out to be a software developer, and before we became 175% government consulting organization. I never knew anything about the government. Second company, started doing the mobile application, and we sold that business where we ended up being a mobile platform for higher education, right? Circle back where we raised $30 million to solve the individual contact problem. We couldn't find the revenue model, and we ended up becoming what is SalesIntel a decade later, right? So the underlying commonality here is be flexible. There's markets that are going to change, conditions, the competitive environments are going to change. The technology is going to, go past you because today everybody's iPhone application, right? As long as you're flexible and listening to the market, I think you're going to come out on the side being.
Absolutely. One of the first things that I told our board members before, like as we've not necessarily like dramatically shifted course because we really haven't, but as we expand our ideas, it's like, well, To be honest with you, this wasn't the idea that you originally in the scope of your investment was that. He was like, yeah, Brad, I expected your ideas to change. You're an idea guy. Like, we're all ideators. We're all founders of things. Why would you expect for only one idea to stick? I expect you to come up with new ideas and be comfortable in that change. So couldn't agree more with you, Manoj. Cool. We'll quickly go over, Melanie, when you think about it the same way, some of the challenges. I know you and I have personally talked a lot over the phone over the last couple of months and quarters about some of them, but what comes to mind and advice you give to founders thinking about it
now? I'd say one, I really like to think of the business as chapters or seasons, right? That kind of come and go. And just, I think, acknowledging that whatever challenge you're facing right now, a year from now, you'll look back and probably have a different insight on, and hopefully look back and realize that that was a blessing in different ways, whether that was in your own leadership and growing. I like to tell my friends that last year I felt like I was in a leadership boot camp, but every time I got to the last level, it was like, nope, you got another one. And it was exhausting and it was hard. And so the number one piece of advice I'd say is learn when you need to take some time to think and strategize. I'm actually taking a week here off soon, and half of it is vacation. The other half is just time for reflection, because I've realized it's so hard for me to really be intentional about working on the business versus in the business. And whenever you're able to get away, I like nature in particular, when you're able to really remove yourself from the problem. I found that every time we've done that, a few years ago, I came back and said, we need to kill our free trial. It's not serving us. It's had a monumental impact on our business. So I'd say make sure that, whatever challenge you're wrestling through, if you just can't find a way out, remove yourself from the actual day-to-day and think about it differently. And just recognize that I think as a founder, last year I was our CTO for 5 months because my co-founder unfortunately had to step away from the business for personal reasons, and I needed to then recruit and find someone. I'm not an engineer by background, by trade. That was a really hard experience for me amongst the markets, but at the same time, I learned so much and got so much insight into our product that I never would have otherwise. And so while it was really challenging at the time, I think I'm a much better leader now as a result. And so just reminding yourself as you're going through those trials that there is, as cheesy as it sounds, a gift in all of this that you will be able to leverage as you continue to move through.
Absolutely. It's okay to embrace the "this too shall pass" mentality, because it's not all going to be tough. But look, you will never find a more empathetic crowd than other founders right now. We have all stubbed our toe. We have all had that heartburn. I think there's anything I can relate to on that same notion. If you don't know the answer to something, embrace the words "I don't know." It's perfectly fine. There's a tremendous amount of pressure we all have to give an answer immediately. It's okay to say, "I don't know that yet," and it's perfectly fine. Neil, in that same vein, when you're thinking about it, challenges that you've had to overcome, what comes to mind and what advice do you have?
Yeah, I think one learning that we've had, and I think a lot of other founders that are in a similar space or horizontal products generally have, is looking at the different ways that people use your product. And while your product can be used for certain use cases, really honing in on the best fit use case or your core ICP is, I think, one of the biggest learnings that we took away. That for us, yes, our product could be used for training, but is it the best use of everyone's time for that? Probably not. And instead, the go-to-market, marketing, sales fit is so much stronger. And so we made a decision as a company around a year and a half ago to really focus on the guided demo component of things for marketing and sales. And that's one of the best decisions that we made, really honing in on that persona. And I think for us, it's really hard to make that decision. I think a lot of founders say hey, people are paying for this other use case. Why turn down those dollars? But it turns out long-term, if they churn at a higher rate and the retention cohort isn't there, if it causes a lot of pain and headache inside your business, it's not the right move long-term. And you have to make those decisions. So I think for us, especially for horizontal products, finding that best fit ICP and staying very firmly in your resolve to stay there, I think has been a big decision for us and a big learning that's really helped our business grow and ultimately make our customers happier, because you can invest in the area more and more. So that was definitely one takeaway for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And for us, that's challenging as founders, because we want to serve everybody. The last thing we want to do is say no, but we know the value of saying no. Sorry, that's part of the persona that we just don't support right now. We will get there, but right now, here's where we are. We're not that wide. Because it's so easy to say, yeah, we can build that. Let me go talk to my engineering team and give me 3 months and we'll be back. stay true to what you're solving for and keep those guardrails up. I know we're getting close on time, so we'll do this final rapid fire little piece of question. So the next 3 or so minutes, really, as we part ways, thinking about the founders that are listening to this call live as we speak, what biggest piece of advice do you want to share with them? It could be a reflection of making a mistake. It could be something of, man, if I wish I could go back in time, I would go back and do this. I would love to hear from everybody, and I'll share a little bit of mine towards the end. But Melanie, we'll start with you. Neil, we'll go second. Manoj, you can bring us home. Go for it,
I'll say 2 things. The first one, the obvious one, don't scale too fast. Remember process before you bring on a lot of people. So that's the first one. The second one is really just around like your core product and quality. Don't lose sight of quality. Stay true to your kernel. Don't settle for a bunch of good features. Focus on a few great features. I think that was the most painful learning I've had. Our motto is be simple and spectacular. And we kind of drifted away from the spectacular piece. And now we're drifting back. It's been about a year of really rebuilding our user experience. All those one-off features now are more cohesive, and it makes a monumental difference to have your customers shouting off the rooftops about it versus being like, this is fine, and here's the 10 things that we want to change. So
customers appreciate that as well, more than we know. Neil, what do you think?
Yeah, I would sum it down to find a problem that is that 10x, 12 out of 10 problem, however you want to say it, that is that hair on fire problem. Because if you can solve that, everything will take care of itself. The go-to-market comes into place. The sales motions become faster. The team has momentum organically. And so if you're looking for one thing, you could look at a bunch of different problems, but identifying and solving really well that key customer pain point and honing in on the ICP that has that is one of the best things you can do as a founder. And that will put you in such a good position long-term. So I really advocate folks think about that.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Stay true. You find that 12 out of 10, oh my gosh, you are going to be building something spectacular, to say Melody's words too. But you are truly going to be satisfying folks. That's also how you build customers for life. I think if there's anything we're finding in our space too, people are fluid. Resources don't necessarily stay at companies for 20 plus years, sort of in previous generations do. So you serve that customer well enough on day one, they will be a customer number 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, because they will find value so much in your product and service that they can't live life without it. But it all starts with 12 out of 10. You're spot on. Manoj, bring us home. I'm curious to know the advice.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with both Melanie and Neil. I think those are foundational aspects of building businesses. To me, yes, you need a business that has a big impact. 12 out of 10. You need to focus and go deeper in solving the problem versus going wider and scaling fast. And in that aspect, Melanie, raising money too quickly, right? I've seen, I made a mistake, and then now, I'm on the other side when I invest as a LP into different funds. Founders, they just want to raise money too fast, right? So the 2 advices from my side are: number 1 is don't raise money until you have proven the product market fit, and then the second is, once you've done that, it's all about the team. Pick the right teammates, and the chances of success are going to exponentially grow with those 2 things.
I couldn't agree more. And can I tell you, all 3 of you, how embracing it is for me to hear from other founders who have built phenomenal companies and scaled them beautifully, to hear advice like, don't grow too fast, or don't raise money really until you need it. There are so many temptations that we have as founders. We all are very idealistic. We want to go and grow the next billion-dollar business, and we know that takes capital and resources to do. But when you really slow down a little bit, you will find that you think a little bit deeper. You take your breaks, Melanie, like you said, clear your head, work on the business, not always in the business. Neil, find the 12 out of 10. It is such a key piece to it. And Manoj, allocate resources the right way. You've done this so many years and for so many different types of companies. So even to hear from you saying, raise capital when you need it, be sure to really solve a really critical problem and embrace your team the right way is so meaningful. The thing that I would part with as my little piece of advice too on that to any founder is, man, find a really quick way to embrace 3 words and say them often. I don't know. And it's perfectly fine to say those and be comfortable in your own skin, not knowing the problems that you don't know are around the corner yet. Because the minute you show a little bit of that humility, you will also quickly find people around you that you can pick up the phone and say, I don't know the answer to this, but I know you do because you're a badass at this thing too. And you'll find this level of empathy and support that you've never felt in other businesses, but it takes a little bit of humility to get there as well. And speaking on behalf of these three amazing founders and CEOs and the journey that I've been fortunate to watch as you all have built your businesses in incredible fashions is no short feat. Can't thank you all enough for joining today. We are right at the top of time, so it's almost like we planned it perfectly. But Manoj, Melanie, Neil, can't thank you both or all three of you enough for really jumping in and sharing a lot of your wisdom and insights. I know there's going to be founders that are listening to this that are excited to go put hands on a keyboard and pen to paper after this and start their next business. So can't thank you all enough. I appreciate it.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That was great.
Yeah,
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Enjoy camp.